This interview is one that you do not want to miss, for sure. It was such an awesome and fun conversation with my friend Kathryn, who's also a fertility care practitioner or a Creighton method instructor of natural family planning. And we sit down and basically just lay out all of the different misconceptions that we have come across in our years of teaching. And we kind of split it up into two different parts. So this is a 2-part series. The first part obviously coming out today, which you're hearing, and then next week, part 2 will come out. And we split it up into pretty much like misconceptions of the pill and hormonal birth control. And then we do misconceptions just about natural family planning, fertility awareness-based methods, which you've probably heard a lot of. So we really, really dive in deep into that topic. It's definitely going to be an interview you don't want to miss. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. My name is Haley and I am your host. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their cycles so they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy and also to manage their fertility. I have a huge passion to teach women and couples about the beauty of their fertility and how the pill is never the answer to women's health. There's a lot of good and not so good information out there about fertility. And so my goal with this podcast is to help you sort out the truth from the weeds. I want to teach you how to chart your cycle and to reach your family planning goals while also maybe even possibly locating hormonal imbalances and to receive proper treatment. I want to help you get in the best hands that you can with the best doctors that you can to reach optimal reproductive health. So if you're ready to get on this journey with me to learn more about your reproductive system, how it was created and how it should be working, and the best medicine in order to make it work if it's not, then you are in the right place. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. Today, I have an interview with a good friend of mine. Her name is Kathryn Shakal. She is a fellow fertility care practitioner teaching the Creighton method of natural family planning. And she's actually one of the people that when I was looking into just getting into teaching NFP and the Creighton method, she's one of the people that I reached out to for lots of advice. And she just has a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. And so I'm really excited to interview her today. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about misconceptions. So just misconceptions about a lot of different things, but specifically misconceptions about the pill, misconceptions about NFP, natural family planning, and just misconceptions that women might think about the way the menstrual cycle works, and that things that we hear a lot that are actually just not true. So we want to really just dive into that today and really kind of correct those misconceptions and really bring light and bring truth to that. So Kathryn, can you just give a quick introduction of yourself? Just tell us a little about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Haley.
Yes.
I never fail to mention that I'm a Midwest girl.
Okay.
It's pretty strong in my blood and still affects, I think, how I encounter people and life today. But I've been living in Arizona for 5 years. I've been working at a midwife birth center for 4 years, and I've been teaching Creighton for 3 years.
Okay.
So that all of those experiences have fed into how I teach clients today and encounter them. And my favorite fact about myself is that I have lived in 5 countries.
Oh my word. Wait, what countries? I did not know this.
The United States.
Of course.
Canada, Austria, Ireland, and Spain.
Okay. Off the podcast, I'm going to have to ask you why you lived in all of those different countries.
Sure.
I'm so curious. That's awesome. Very, very cool. That's a new fact that I did not know about you. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. Which misconception do you want to start out with? Let's start with whatever you feel needs to be the starting.
I'm going to start with women are always fertile.
Okay.
Because I was probably 18, 19, 20, something like that, and multiple of my friends or my friends' friends would say that to me because I would be talking about cycles because I was always a nerd about it. Mm-hmm. And I specifically remember this one girl saying to me, "Oh, you mean women aren't always fertile?" And I was like, "That's it. I need I need education in order to share this information more fully and succinctly and professionally with people. So then I actually went and was trained with FEM.
Okay.
In my early 20s, and had multiple clients kind of unofficially throughout that, and was really able to share that information with these young girls, which formed, I think, them and a lot of conversations. I just had a friend a few months ago, and that was over 10 years, or that was about 10 years ago.
I was gonna say, I didn't even know FEM was around 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had a friend a few months ago say that was pivotal in her learning her cycles, and I had no idea.
Wow.
So that I continue to encounter, even moms who've had babies don't necessarily understand that there is a rhythm and a flow to the ups and downs of their hormones. How many, that there are over a dozen hormones involved just in the female reproductive system, and making sure that ovulation occurs, and that most of the time she actually is infertile.
Okay.
I think that's probably my top one that I have encountered, and that has steered my trajectory and how I approach this information and share it.
Yeah. So when is she fertile then?
That's a good question.
In general.
And it's not day 14 for every single woman. Actually, that's the smallest percentage of women are actually ovulating on day 14 of her cycle.
Okay.
So many women will fall somewhere in that range, maybe 10 to 18 days.
If she has like a normal cycle.
If she has a regular cycle, yes. So from the first day of her period, maybe 10 to 18 days, somewhere in that. After that first day would be the highest likelihood of when she would be ovulating.
Okay.
But for some women who have really long cycles, then it's not going to come until day 30 or 40 or 50, depending on how long that cycle is. Which honestly leads into another misconception that I hear a lot, which is that women skip their periods.
Yeah.
And I've had multiple girls, especially when I was teaching FEM, I think, because those were younger girls and their cycles weren't as regular.
Yeah.
But even now, when I work with clients who've been on the pill in the past, part of the reason for that is because they were, quote unquote, skipping their periods.
Okay.
So they were only having a period every 2 or 3 or 4 months, sometimes longer. And so they did not realize that actually something that really almost necessitates having a period is ovulating first, or at least having an ovulatory event that leads to this sloughing off or breaking down of the uterine lining, which we perceive as our period, also known as menses. And so women are not actually skipping their period as much as it's just taking them a long time to have that estrogen, that necessary estrogen rise, and other hormones like luteinizing hormone to cause ovulation to occur within the body, so that it can then shift into maintaining the lining for a possible pregnancy, and if there is not one, breaking that down and sloughing it off.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that she can't actually skip a period, it's just that her ovulation is being delayed, which means that her period is then being delayed.
Correct.
And what would be a few of the reasons why a girl might perceive that she is skipping her period, but in reality, for whatever reason, she is just having a late ovulation, which means that she would have a late period? Like, what would be a few of the reasons?
That's a great question. I would say the ones that I see the most often would be, especially in our society, when we are so prone to, and I have done this many times, especially as a single woman, it's harder to have a regular schedule. And so are you actually nourishing your body with healthy fats and protein, or are you drinking coffee for the first half of your day and then maybe eating a mid-afternoon snack and then supper, and then there's my Midwest.
There you go. Yeah, supper. There you go.
I told you it was strong. And then getting 6 hours of sleep, because you have all these things to do in the evening. Maybe you're socializing, and Phoenix is a very vibrant community. There's always something to do. And women's bodies need proper nutrition and proper sleep.
Yeah.
Pretty much constantly. When you're like 10,
Yes.
maybe it doesn't matter quite as much, but we do for our fertility to be regularized and for a healthy egg to be formed and ovulation to be occurring. So that's one I think that's really easy to fall into.
Yeah, for sure.
Another common one is some form of hormonal imbalance where her ovaries are maybe inflamed. This is somewhat commonly known as PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so eggs are growing and maturing, but they're not actually being released. And so it causes this grape-looking like formation on the ovary. And then because each one is forming these little cysts, it's harder for the ovary to actually achieve ovulation later on. So then it keeps trying and delaying.
Yeah. It kind of looks like, when you look at an ultrasound of somebody who has PCOS, it looks like a string of pearls is in their ovary, because they just have a bunch of like immature follicles, really, that have not yet ruptured, and they just have not gone over the hump, which makes sense as to why so many women with PCOS have irregular cycles where ovulation is being delayed, right? Because they can't, there's an impediment to ovulation happening, which would mean that their period is not coming as regularly, or they're quote unquote skipping that period, or they're not, it's being delayed.
Correct. Yeah. I think another one is BMI may be tied with how much exercise. Okay. Because I've had 2 clients specifically where we really needed to revamp their exercise routine because they were exercising too much. One woman was having very irregular cycles, and she had to give up something that she really loved, not doing it as frequently, that is. And once she did that, in addition to adding more protein and calories to her diet, we saw her cycles regularize. Interesting. Which was really cool. And then another one of my clients, she's so impressive because she does the competitions with other gym members. I don't remember what it's called, but I was like,
is it like American Ninja Warrior or something like that?
It's not that. But if I thought about it hard enough, I can maybe remember.
That's okay.
But she like squats and presses an impressive amount of weight. Wow. And so
what a woman.
I was like, I'm so sorry, but if you really want to achieve pregnancy, which her and her husband did, they'd had a couple miscarriages by this point, you have to decrease. This is something you'll have to give up for at least a few months. Yeah. And a few months later, she was pregnant. Wow. And yeah, it was such a happy moment for all of us.
Yeah. I think we really underestimate, definitely stress is one of those things that can delay ovulation.
Right.
Like,
and
even
stress
just
is
like
a huge word.
But even still, physical stress is still like exactly what you're just saying. Physical stress on the body can absolutely affect that. I've had multiple clients as well, and just people that have reached out to me saying, I really enjoy working out, or I really enjoy this sport and I'm really intense with it, but to maybe the detriment of their fertility. And so is there, it's like, okay, we need a healthy lifestyle. It's good to be exercising, but then I feel like we can get to the point where it is too much, to the point where it's almost unnatural for our bodies to be under this much stress physically. So I can totally see that. But then talking about stress, though, definitely other forms of stress can also affect the cycle for sure.
And delay ovulation very easily. Yeah. This is something that I know you also review with your clients. Yeah. This delaying of ovulation due to stress. And I'm always quick to convey to them and define with them that stress doesn't, it can be very easy for us to assume that stress equals I am stressed out. So mentally. Yeah. But it doesn't, that's a component. But it could also be an emotional, especially women are very relational beings. And if one relationship, especially with someone who's close to us, is off, that can really affect how we think about things, how we're approaching situations, how our other relationships are going. And that will feed into your cycle as well, because the precursors to estrogen are also the precursors to cortisol. And so if cortisol is rising, it's snatching those precursors to estrogen and delaying that rise that needs to happen to form the egg to help cause ovulation.
So would I be correct in saying that when cortisol is rising, when you're stressed, that's then inhibiting estrogen from rising? Is that what you're saying?
That in a simplified form.
A simplified layperson term. Okay, gotcha. And okay, so that makes sense as to the reason why it does delay.
Yes. When I learned that, I was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much more sense. Yeah. Because I was reading all these different kinds of stressors, all the hard ones that we think of, bereavement or something like that, but also traveling for your honeymoon, preparing for your wedding. What are other big things? Exams, not necessarily bad things, but they weigh on you in one way or another. Yeah. And your body has to be able to adapt to that. So cortisol is rising. This is a natural, good response. And you don't need to ovulate to survive, but you need to survive. So cortisol then surpasses or trumps the need for a rise in estrogen.
Oh my gosh. See, I knew about the stress thing, but I didn't know the actual reason, biological reason why with cortisol cortisol. That is really interesting. Wow, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we can't skip a period. Misconception number 2. So you're either stressed or malnourished. So let's eat.
Yeah, right. It's a good summary. If you take anything away from this conversation.
So go eat some good protein and take a nice warm bath with a fiction book. That's
yes.
Or go watch The Office. That's my go-to stress reliever.
Not a show I've watched. For me, it would probably be White Collar.
Oh, okay.
Really enjoy.
I've never seen that, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, it's a low-key, just humorous show.
Okay.
Like The Office, but different category.
Yeah. Michael Scott just gets me every time. I just love him. Anyways, okay. So what would be the next misconception?
Well, we were talking about skipping periods, and I think that leads into what are the misconceptions surrounding the pill? Because many women are put on it to take care of something, a very high percentage. Some to take care of something that is an issue that's inhibiting their daily life to some degree. For example, extremely painful periods. Some women are put on the pill to regularize their cycle because they are quote unquote skipping periods. Or acne could be another big reason that they are put on it. And so the pill is very easily seen as the remedy to these issues. But this is a major misconception because it doesn't get to the root of why these things are occurring. And so if a woman goes on the pill, she may see, and will likely see, a decrease in the issues that she went on it for, but other issues will then start, like an increase in inflammation, in fatigue, in weight gain, in depression. The amount of women who are put on the pill and then have to be put on antidepressants is astounding. And that really kind of shakes me up a little bit as far as what are we doing? Why are we prescribing this like candy? And another is that the pill is perceived as safe. So we trust our doctors, which is understandable.
We should be able to.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so if they're saying, oh, well, the pill will take care of this issue, you're like, okay, that sounds good. But we're not then told that it could cause pulmonary embolisms, which I experienced with one of my coworkers. She was rushed to the ER and almost died because she had several. And it was only because she was put on the pill. She was in her early 20s, and there was no other reason for them. She said never again. One of my cousins had pretty severe breast cancer, had to have a double mastectomy because she was on birth control. Wow. And she actually then became part of a study at Mayo Health in Rochester, Minnesota, because of her experience. Wow. And so it's really beautiful to see her testimony because she had no other reason to not like the pill other than that.
Yeah.
Like there were no ethical reasons, nothing like that informed her decision, but now all of her kids are staunchly against the pill because of that experience.
Yeah.
And that these links are continuing to be formed between the pill and these adverse effects. Another one that I learned recently is that it increases inflammation to such a degree that you could develop what's called leaky gut. So you're trying to take in these proteins and these fats and these nutrients that we were just discussing, and then your body's not able to absorb them because the pill is creating this inflamed environment within your uterus and within your gut.
Wow.
Which was fascinating to me. And another one that I've encountered pertaining to the pill is that what does it do if it's used for birth control?
Yeah.
So most often what it does is suppresses ovulation because it doesn't allow for the rise of estrogen in an abnormal way. So we were just talking about how we need estrogen to rise for ovulation to occur.
Right.
Well, the pill or most forms of birth control could be
birth control,
yeah, exactly. Right. The implant or the hormonal IUD are causing the suppression of that because they're exuding into the body artificial estrogen and or progesterone.
Right.
And so, yes, most of the time it does suppress ovulation, but it also creates within the uterus this very inflamed environment so that if ovulation does take place and the egg is fertilized and you now have conceived a baby, that environment within the uterus is not open to and welcoming to that new life, and it then effectively becomes an abortifacient.
Yeah.
Which most women don't know.
Yeah.
They just have a heavy period and don't realize.
And just you saying this, I mean, I already know this information, but probably a lot of our listeners don't, because this is not something that is taught. And I feel like it's such an injustice that this is not something that is, like, how many women are on hormonal contraception, whether it is the pill, Nexplanon, IUD, Depo-Provera shot, whatever it is, right? I highly doubt any of them were told that this is a possibility, that if ovulation does happen, because we know it's not 100% effective, and so if ovulation does occur when you're on the pill, that means pregnancy can occur, but with what you were just saying and how that newly conceived life won't be able to implant, and you would never know that you're even pregnant. Like, it is such an injustice that this is not taught to us. And I actually, when I was doing a class for marriage preparation. So in the Catholic Diocese of Phoenix, for couples that want to get married in the church, they go through a whole natural family planning course. And so that's also one of the ways that Kathryn and I know each other, is because we both teach a lot of engaged couples. And I actually had a girl come up to me after one of my classes, and she told me that she already had an appointment scheduled to get her IUD removed. And it was because during her marriage preparation classes, so I can't take credit for it, unfortunately. It was the person before me. But she learned from the class right before mine that the IUD, especially the IUD, whether it's hormonal or not, can act as an abortifacient. And so, and she had never learned that ever.
Yes.
And so upon learning that, she was just like, I'm done. I am done with this. And so she told me after that class that she had with me that she had already had an appointment to get it removed. So praise be to God. Yeah, it's awesome. But it just gets me so fired up when we talk about this, because of how much of an injustice it is, and that women just don't know. I mean, of all the information that we don't know about the pill, I feel like this is the most like bone shaking of them all. And so, yeah, so I'm so glad you brought that up. But yeah, misconceptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and again, with all of even just the actual side effects, I mean, whether you're taking the pill because you have heavy periods, or because you are quote unquote skipping your period, or you're taking the pill for birth control reasons, no matter what the reasoning is that you're taking it, it's acting the same way upon your body, right? So with all of these side effects, they're possible in any woman that is taking these synthetic hormones. So yeah, so I'm so glad you brought that up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because the pill, no matter why you're taking it, is a constant no.
So just unpack that.
It's a no to a possible pregnancy. But then it's also a no to, like, I don't want acne. Understandable. I don't want debilitating cramps. Understandable. I don't want irregular cycles. Understandable. So the pill is always, no, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing this. Rather than how your body has a beautiful cycle to it. How do we understand it and work with it and walk alongside and say, okay, but instead of just, no, stop, we're never going to look and see what's happening, going past that to, okay, but what are the good things that are happening that we can encourage, and what are the hard things that we want to help alleviate?
Right.
And I think for me, that more expansive approach is one of the reasons that I love teaching NFP.
Yeah.
Or natural family planning.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, it is a lot, everything with the pill is like putting a block to something. And it can be really effective in suppressing those symptoms, those unwanted symptoms, for sure. And there are definitely women that say they feel even better on the pill, for sure. But the second they get off of it, they're going to fall right back into feeling crappy. And so is it actually fixing the problem, or is it just putting a Band-Aid on the problem? Right?
And they may now have exacerbated issues.
Exactly.
Coming off the pill.
Exactly. And so, yeah. And I don't know, I forget where I heard this statistic, but I've heard it multiple times, I know. So if that gives you the validity of it, I don't know. But I've heard that.
All my friends say.
But I have smart friends, so I believe them. But I've heard that it takes 10 years on average to properly diagnose endometriosis.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. This friend says that's true.
This friend says that's true. So from multiple sources say, 10 years. And the reason is because when somebody has the very, very typical symptoms of endometriosis, one being incredibly painful periods, the first thing isn't, okay, let's actually look at the patterns of your cycle. Let's look at these things. Let's look and see if you have endometriosis, right? That's not the first thing that most mainstream medicine is going to do. Actually, the first thing they're probably going to do is just put you on the pill. Because it could help, and it probably will help alleviate the painful periods. But it's actually just placing a Band-Aid on it and actually allowing the endometriosis to worsen while you are trying to kind of suppress the symptoms of it being on the pill. Once you get off the pill, then it's even worse than when you got on it. So, craziness. Well, this might be a really good segue then into, because we were just talking about NFP, natural family planning. Do you want to talk a little bit about then misconceptions of NFP? Because we know, having taught this for many years, we know that there's a lot of those too. So do you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, let's do a few.
Okay.
My favorite one is that it doesn't work. And I often say, well, what do you mean by that? And again, in a society where this, well, thankfully, actually, it's becoming more prevalent.
It is.
Like, even the FDA has approved a couple apps, which doesn't take into account everything pertaining to a woman's cycle, especially if she's irregular.
Use
However,
caution.
Yes. However, we are making steps.
Yeah.
But NFP, if this is the everything, and this is the opposite of no, let's suppress all things, to what's your body telling us? What signs and symptoms do you have for vitality? What biomarkers are you noticing? Why do you want to learn these things? What are you learning about your body? And then if you're using it specifically to postpone pregnancy, that's where the phrase, oh, it doesn't work, often comes in.
Right.
And that could be because most people tend to think that NFP is some sort of calendar or moon rhythm, and you just set aside these certain amount of days, because if you ovulate on day 14, you rule out those days as days where a couple might come together, well, then you shouldn't have a conception. However, many women are not textbook perfect in their cycles.
More and more women, I feel like, are not textbook.
Probably, yeah, true.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of it being effective, is lower. That is understandable. But that's not taking into account that there are actually a solid handful of verified, tested, very rigorous in like learning the particulars of and applying them, ways of learning your cycle and being able to time intercourse in those days of infertility, and having a success rate of postponing pregnancy at least as high as hormonal birth control, if not higher. Yeah. So there's the perfect use and then the user use and some variability there. But I was just looking at statistics yesterday to make sure that I was saying this accurately. And some forms of postponing pregnancy that are not NFP related are actually less effective in their user rate than using NFP to postpone pregnancy. Okay. So that's the biggest one. And when we're able to have that conversation, when I'm able to have that conversation with clients, especially as they're learning their cycles, they realize that there's a whole new world of things that they did not know about themselves, that husbands didn't know about their wives. And that actually then becomes a really beautiful conversation of diving into loving one another more, and especially her being able to understand herself. Yeah. And so it's truly a beautiful conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, it would be amazing if you could leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously to be able to continue to produce these episodes for you. Remember that these podcasts are available on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon, and YouTube. And you can always go to my website, truthandfertility.com, to learn more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.